I'll be very, very quick. I was just named the Chief Digital Officer of the 4As only a few weeks ago, so I'm really happy that Drew and Paul put this conference together to help us define the mission. And also, as we've seen today, and all this year actually, there's no doubt that the range of programmatic ad delivery strategies and the data technologies that underpin and drive them are commanding an immense amount of attention in our industry and advertising today, some with praise and some with grave concern. So I'm really, really happy that this panel is going to be here today and that Eric is going to lead it with to explore some of the economics of programmatic and what it means for advertisers, agencies, and media companies going forward. So,
cool. Thanks, Chip. So I'm really excited to be here with this panel. We have a really appropriate lineup of people for this conversation and just in general. So actually, if you guys just want to briefly, if anybody doesn't know Q, I'd be very surprised. but any of these
after my 2-minute infomercial this morning.
Yeah, exactly. So, but just a moment on just to orient everybody. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, why you're here.
The who I am, I can do. Why I'm here, it's probably just up to Drew. So Quentin George. As I said this morning, up until 7 months ago or so, I was Chief Digital Officer for IPG Media Brands. But since have left and with my partner Brendan Worcroft created Unbound, the first independent systems integrator for programmatic media. We think there's a big opportunity for both brands and publishers to get some independent advice to make sense of what's going on in programmatic media today.
Great, thanks Eric, thanks Q. I'm Tag Greninger. I run product at Adapt TV, now part of AOL. How did I get here? 7 years ago I was in graduate school at Stanford studying computer science and trying to make machines intelligent. And through a variety of means found out that advertising was an area that really needed application of that technology, and I've spent the last 7 years of my life building out programmatic tools to try to make brand advertising work better in digital video, a specific corner of our industry.
Cool.
I'm Kevin Wassung, CEO of Lynn Mobile, which is owned by a company called Lynn Media. We own and operate 43 television stations across the country, all ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, CW affiliates. I've been focused on building a mobile solution that really started with analytics, suite of ad solutions, and now aggregating audience that extends beyond the footprint of Lynn Media as a whole, but very much focused in the area of premium, focused on the creative side of things as well. My background is from the agency world where I had started digital at JWT in the late 90s and ran that, and then ran a digital publishing company in finance for the last 8 years called Minionville. Strange name, but a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, so the premise of this panel is to talk about creativity in an age of programmatic media. So automating ad buying and whether it's possible to have creativity live in an environment of the constant process improvement and efficiencies of what programmatic brings to brands. But I want to start, before we get into that, I want to start just laying out a premise about the economics of programmatic. Virtually every panel today has mentioned programmatic in one way or another. But one of the things I just want to lay out there is that if you look at the role of the CMO, the corporate brand marketing stack underneath the CMO, for 75 years, the job of the CMO was basically to spend money wisely, right? And that was a tenuous position, and we saw that 18-month tenure start to happen up till recently, because when your role in the company was on the cost side and you were spending money in the marketplace, and it was very difficult to actually prove what you were doing was paying off at in the aisle or at the cash register. That was a tough position to be in. But within the last, say, 10 years, another thing happened, which was they started to get tied to revenue. So the job and the role of the agency and the role of the ecosystem that serviced media took on three crucial roles. One was we were all involved in lowering the cost of media, right? Why do brands use media agencies? To go out and negotiate volume advantage and leverage in the marketplace to basically lower their television, cost of television dollars. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So that was job one. Then there was a second job, which was lower the cost of servicing media. Now, I know that's going to hit some buttons for Q. And the third is revenue growth, right? So now the job of the CMO and people in the CMO's organization in big brands now has three components, right? Lower the cost or manage the cost of media, manage or lower the cost of servicing media, and grow revenue. That's where I see programmatic, right? So it isn't just about what kind of advancements in software and artificial intelligence can we make so that we can claim that robots have truly taken over. I see it as, and one of the things that I promote when I talk about programmatic is the ability to lower the cost of media, the ability to lower the cost of servicing media, and the impact on revenue growth. Sometimes we forget about that last thing. So I want to throw out there as a premise your reaction to how programmatic is actually performing against those three crucial needs on the brand side.
A couple of things. First of all, I think the media business is looking a lot more like financial services. I don't think programmatic is as much about lowering the cost of media as it is about getting a better return on the investment. To me, programmatic in a lot of ways is like the options market. And so, agencies today essentially are playing the role of investment specialists. You get a pot of money and you need to invest it in different areas, some in equity, some in options, some in bonds, and get a return on that investment for your clients. RTB, to me, specifically, it was funny, and I was telling this story earlier. I was in a meeting with a president of one of the big four networks of the owned and operated, and I was talking RTB throughout the whole meeting, and at a certain point he stopped me, and he was dead serious. He said, "Is RTB race to the bottom?" And I started laughing, and the rest of the people in the room started laughing. And he's like, "What's so funny?"
That's a publisher's perspective. That's their worst fear, right?
It is their worst fear, absolutely. And I think we see that margin compression certainly on the side of the RTB world, and there's a lot of concern over it. I do think it plays a critical role. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's about lowering the cost of media versus finding a more efficient and effective way to get a return on the dollars that are being spent in marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my view is very much that I actually share a lot of your view, which is that very much it ought to be about driving ultimately value in some way, right? You're spending media dollars not so you feel good or use the whole budget or whatever. Although a lot of agencies, I think, can often kind of feel that way. But when you think about it from the CMO or even the CEO's perspective about why is that huge cost item there in my budget, it's there to drive sales, right? And we all know that if that cost item goes away, it has a negative impact on sales, right? If you don't keep up with share of voice, you don't keep up with share of market. Mm-hmm. But at a more fine-grained level, I think we have a huge hill to climb in front of us as digital overall. So the scene I want to set is that I think digital and programmatic technologies have been very, very successful at driving ROI for online purchases of various sorts, right? So if we're interested in driving some sort of online activity, I think programmatic technology has been an incredible boon to marketers, where I think we have very little idea still of how to proceed, and very, very few best practices to point to is in the world of brand advertising. Because if we really care about moving perceptions, which is at the end of the day what a lot of those ad dollars, probably the overwhelming a portion of those ad dollars in the those 250 billion ad dollars worldwide or whatever it is, are going after. We actually don't yet know how to do it in digital. I'm happy to throw out some of the things that we think we can do and that we are doing now, but we don't have a track record of digital of doing that. And the creativity, to come back to your original theme here, I think is actually how to apply programmatic technologies and adapt them to actually achieving brand objectives, over and above the sort of direct response objectives that I think they've become very good at.
Quentin? Arbitrage, huge fee loads to do all that stuff. Isn't that working the opposite direction of trying to manage the cost of servicing media?
So, as I sit and listen here, I think that, we have to kind of go back to first principles. The role of marketing has not changed in 1,000 years, 200 years. Although the tools and the interaction methods have changed, balancing effectiveness and efficiency has always been kind of struggle, irrespective of which medium we've been operating in. The challenge that I would have is, I think we're doing a pretty shitty job in digital in general of doing that. If you're on the brand side, as a CMO, you look at the complexity of managing these channels, you look at the cost of creating new interaction points, and along comes, folks in the media industry, and we say, well, it's going to cost you 3 times to spend $1 in digital than it is in traditional. And so, when you go back to when we thought about how programmatic was supposed to roll out, it was supposed to solve 3 problems. The first is, how can I discover better audiences that might, be easier for me to convert? How can we arrive at a more fair price quickly and efficiently? And how can we optimize decisions better? And so historically, we've been able to accomplish that with, sample level data, with 3 martini lunches and 24-year-old media planners. So that today is response is to have respondent level data, more efficient marketplaces, meaning bid-based or auctions, and then as we famously say, we didn't discover or invent programmatic media so that we can have media planners make bad decisions 6 times faster. And so, I think the challenge that you have today is that there are a lot of people that are nibbling away at trying to solve and put together supply and demand. But overall, I think we've done a relatively poor job of obfuscating, or we've done a good job of obfuscating the true value, because everybody is trying to be a point solution. And it makes it very, very difficult if you are a brand or if you're a publisher to come to terms with how to distribute these sophisticated experiences.
Yeah.
Well, here, a lot of this is driven, I totally agree with your scathing indictment there, but a lot of this problem it comes out of the fundamentals of the agency client model, right? And there are a lot of good things about the agency client model. I get and I understand that clients have a hard time retaining the kind of talent that you can actually centralize in an agency, and that agencies can build up certain kind of expertise and buying clout and data clout and all these kinds of things. And that's great. But at the end of the day, the agency's job is to make the client happy and to re-up the engagement and in fact grow the account, right? That's the job, right? So when they go home or they come into the office every morning and think, how do I grow the account, right? So I need to show that I'm being smart and I'm adding value on the dollars so they give me more dollars next year. And this plays exactly into some of the problems you talked about around sort of arbitrage and so on, because it's like, well, if I can get somebody else to make me look smart, right, that helps, because those people are expensive. Number 2, if I can actually have lots of technologies, lots of point solutions, and then I show that I'm a system integrator, sorry, that I show that I'm adding value by putting them together, that's actually good, then I'm actually adding value. And I don't have the perfect alternative to offer, but I do want to mention that some of the fact that we have fragmentation and that we have complexity actually comes out of the fact that there's an agent in the middle making a lot of these decisions, right? And programmatic hasn't changed that basic fact. In fact, it's actually made it worse. Yeah.
There's this real polarity between programmatic and brand. And in mobile, to me, it's even more amplified. And when we talk about brand, primarily because of the standard that the industry has adopted, which I think it's fair to say most brands hate. Most agencies have figured out a way to make money off of it, primarily programmatically. So you're thinking 320 by 50, 300 by 50, these tiny little banner units, which is a horrible experience for brands. And because that's become the norm across the entire industry, you have media buyers and planners who are just looking to buy as much as they possibly can and say, hey, look at how many impressions I got for your money. And that's been, to me, the prevailing wisdom that's been driving a lot of the market right now, and that's what needs to change. And we're still in the nascent stages of mobile, and we have an opportunity to change that and create a much better brand experience, but it's going to take both publishers and advertisers to make that happen. And a guy like Lou Pascalis when he was at Amex, he said, I was talking to him, he said, look, if premium content goes away, I have no place to put my brand anymore. And I love that statement. To me, that's just indicative of why I'm where I am. But what we do from an advertising experience perspective needs to completely change. And then RTV or programmatic has a very strong role in what we ultimately do. But a lot of things have to change.
Yeah, so the power of mobile is really exciting because we can take crappy messages and get them geofenced within 3 feet of a store.
But you can't read them. You need glasses to see them.
So let's talk about those crappy messages, though, for a moment. So, Tag, you made an important point earlier about television dollars, right? Or you alluded to a point about the prospect of television dollars or brand dollars that are normally spent in television, where we have sight, sound, and motion, the ability to tell a linear story. Does programmatic have to be binary? Does it have to be that it's totally efficient, but there's no room for creativity at the same time? Is it either on or is it off? How do we bridge? And are there good examples? How do we bridge across mobile, across television, across the shifting of all this? How do we bridge that to bring this incredible efficiency that we know is there to serve better messaging than we have?
Okay, there's two directions to take your question that I can see. One is in the direction of like talking about creative optimization and creative sort of testing and validation being in a digital environment. You can get a much better signal about that. Okay, and that's interesting. I think, for example, one of the ways that I think some of our more sophisticated clients think about digital video is sort of proving ground. Let's actually do a whole bunch of edits or cuts of our creative, including different messaging and offers and so on. Put it out in the digital universe, be able to compare results, and then double down when we do our TV buy, which is sort of all or nothing, on the messages that really work. And I think that's useful. But I would also, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, but I think creativity, you think of, I'm an engineer fundamentally, so I think of creativity another way too, which is like having to solve problems, right? And I think just sort of taking the programmatic playbook and applying it to this new television, right? This new digital video, which is television, isn't going to work, right? This new digital video universe is part television. It has a television as one parent, and it has display, roughly speaking, as the other parent. And the things you can do there, or that you want to do, are qualitatively different. So I'll give you an example. In TV, you want to be very good about getting, obviously you care very much about the placements. There's a whole layer of caring about what programming you're in, and actually which pod and which position in which pod, and and jockeying to have that, and having an agency who has the clout that can get you that, and all that stuff. But then there's this whole other layer of being able to hit a particular audience efficiently. Say, I know my audience, right? I know the kind of people that buy, Tide or L'Oreal or whoever it is, right? Ford trucks. But now, and I've actually got a method on television of doing that. But I don't have a method on digital of doing that. And I just want to put that challenge out here because I think a lot of us think we're pretty smart with digital techniques. If I wanted to go out and find people who are, potential Tide buyers, laundry detergent buyers, right? Which in general on TV we'd say that's a women 25 to 54, right? But we can be a little more precise about it, but that's roughly it, right? How do you do that at scale with the frequency you want, in the programs you want on digital? Okay, that requires creativity. And one of the things that we've done, to toot our own horn for 1 second, is to try to model what Nielsen thinks about the audiences out there in the digital landscape. Okay, it wasn't going and taking cookies from Blue Kai wasn't going to do it. No, no slight to Blue Kai. It's just that's not what they're designed to do. There was no data source we could buy from any single data provider that matched nicely sort of a Nielsen-defined demographics audience at scale. You could find small slices that were high index for women 25 to 54, but I couldn't find 60% of the US population in that demo. So we actually had to go and sort of combine and synthesize a new model of users that sort of Nielsen wouldn't give us and no individual provider would give us to go after that group and target a TV-like audience on digital. I think that was some creativity there, and I think we need to actually continue with that line of research to figure that out. But at the end of the day, of course, it doesn't end there. It's not just about hitting a Nielsen demographic audience. You got to go further. You got to find, well, which of that audience are responsive, and how do I double down on them so that I actually spend my dollars more intelligently, so that people, when they stand in that grocery store aisle, look at all the detergents, all 27 of them, and pick the right one off the shelf, right? And how do I track back and know that that's actually happening? That's hard.
I think there's a bigger opportunity that programmatic, because we can complain about the situation we find ourselves in. I think this is temporary. A lot of this opaqueness is going to get blown out of the water, and people will be able to extract the requisite value to what they give, commensurate value to what they provide. The bigger opportunity that I see with programmatic is most of what's been happening with creative experiences over the last 10 or 15 years has been this reversal of, instead of trying to put everything in one single condensed message, is to create richer experiences that give consumers more relevant touch points with a particular brand. What programmatic offers to creative agencies and to content creators or experience creators is a unique mechanism, because what it allows you to do is, instead of to try to condense all your messaging down into one banner or one microsite or one experience, it allows you the ability to be able to tell stories over time. Mm-hmm. And that's a really big and important idea, because it gets us out of this, this arbitrage. Is it brand? Is it direct? No, let's start talking about and delivering against the promise of telling experiences over time. It's a much richer canvas. It crosses across multiple different types of interaction points, and ultimately can engage consumers in different ways, because at the end of the day, we ought to be able to be responsive to what our consumers tell us.
I agree. And the thing that I've actually really appreciated about programmatic and what it offers brands is the roadmap. So the byproduct of programmatic is it produces a roadmap for creatives to see the different situations in consumer behaviors. Mm-hmm. So commuting behavior in the morning, mm-hmm. different times during the day, different screens where the messages that are adaptive to that context and location become relevant. And also the fact that we're seeing people who are in market. So people, you can be in market for a car one week, but you weren't the week before. And so the messaging is totally different. I think that one of the great products that we're able to bring back to brands, and the way I wish brands looked at programmatic, was as a roadmap for creativity. Yep. In order to adapt messages to all the variables, yep. rather than, I got a linear 30, let's see how we can...
Yeah, but the biggest problem is we've got to get programmatic out of conversations that relate to media. If we can't get the creative and the content and experience creators excited about this, mm-hmm. and right now, the unfortunate reality is when you go speak to them, they roll their eyes and say, isn't that the DR bullshit that I don't want to be involved in? Yeah. And we're not engaging with them in a thoughtful enough mechanism to be able to say, let's create not just responsive messaging, but differentiated service. If you know so much about the consumer you're trying to create an experience for, why do we feel we have to give the same experience to the same group of people and expect different outcomes?
I agree. Kevin,
you're talking about the promise, not the reality. And the problem is, the reality right now is that programmatic is driving down price. It is the domain of the media agencies to get a bigger bang for the buck, and it's not translating back to the creatives at all. The ultimate promise to me of programmatic is being able to recognize those patterns both creatively and in placement, and then put it to work across all of the media channels. But we're not there. And as long as it still falls within the silo and it all becomes about price, it's going to continue to, I think, dumb down creativity and be all about volume.
You know, one of the really cool things that you could do with programmatic to inform creative, I think you could actually start to measure the value of good creative, right? So for example, right? And you could actually come along and say, okay, here is a tactic in the campaign where I spammed, you know, a whole bunch of different audiences with standard creative. Now here's a tactic in the campaign where I actually spent money or time, people's time, to customize messages for particular environments or for particular audiences and so on. Was that worthwhile activity? Did it actually yield benefits? And you know, from what I understand, actually, when people try to go and measure these things, it actually often is, right? I mean, when done right, it can have huge impact, right? If you're creating content that's relevant for the user and associating your brand with it, you can have huge multiples in terms of that sort of ROI. It depends, again, we need to come back to what is ROI in a brand context, but it absolutely can prove that out. And I think a lot of creative people would find that really maybe a little scary, but empowering, right? Because they actually put a number of value on what it is that they're doing and what they're offering.
Yeah. Are we, want to do questions or get the hell out of here? All right, we're getting the hook. All right, thank you guys.